Thanksgiving? No? Okay. Well, if you've made gravy, you don't want lumps, right? And those lumps come from the powdered either baking, what is it, the cornstarch or flour having, kind of clumped together. So what you do is you sprinkle it over the top and let it absorb fully with water before you mix it. But this is also giving us a chance not only to make sure all of our particles are absorbed with water, but also a chance to measure. So as we sprinkle the plaster on top, you'll notice that it actually drops to the bottom and starts to build up. It's hard to see, but if you get close, you can see it. And what we're looking for is that perfect ratio of water to plaster, and that is indicated by these beautiful little islands. It actually should be like an archipelago, like a marshland in there, instead of like a volcanic island with a lot of deep lagoons around it. So that's why I'm sprinkling it. I'm sprinkling it over the top of the entire thing so I have this kind of even drop down. Come on in close so you can see. Take a couple pictures if you want. You can see that it's starting to come up. And you're seeing now that it's like a barrier reef or something. But as I come up, what I want is like a swampy marshland. Right? And many people will make the mistake of either putting too much or too little. Can you come over and see? I want everybody to see exactly what's going here, because everybody will screw this up the first or second time, or the fourth or fifth too. The ratio of plaster to water is important. Okay? So what's happening inside of that plaster is all those particles are starting to set up. So we can't go too slow, nor can we go too fast. So there's a kind of a good pacing to this as well. All right, so I could add a little bit more in here. You can see that I'm sprinkling it in and I'm getting these little islands. Those islands aren't sinking. If they're sinking, they're not islands, right? What are they if they're sinking? So some geographic...
Sinking islands?
So what I do is like this. Now, I wait until all those particles on top are fully absorbed. You can see them change color. Right? So now I have a good plaster to water ratio. All right? Okay? See that? See, there's nothing really dry there, but you have a little bit of, the good scattering of the, no deep lagoons and no high mountains. That's important. Okay, so now I'm going to mix it. All right, and the best way to mix this is by putting my hand in to the bottom and kind of mixing it around. What I'm not doing is whipping it. I'm not making whipped cream here. Because what happens with whipped cream, why is it whipped cream? It has bubbles in it, right? A little chunk of something. And if I have bubbles in it, what's going to happen to my surface of my mold? And all the air bubbles all through it. Exactly. Did you do mold making? No, not at all. So what I want to do is I'm going to put my hand in and kind of gently agitate it and combine it. So now I'm kind of mixing it up. Now, it is very important you go through those steps in those order. I put water in, then I do the plaster, and then I mix. I can't go back on that. And I don't want to do that out of sequence because I can't put more plaster in. All the plaster in here is now really starting to set up. If I put new plaster in, it's going to be at a different rate and it's going to screw up my plaster. If I put more water in, that will kill my plaster as well. It will make it all messed up. So you have to do it in that order. Plaster is very cheap, okay? If you screw it up, just dump it out. Just put it to the side and start over. Don't try to force it. Don't ruin your cast over cheap plaster, okay? I promise you I'll be very impressed if you make that decision, make that critical decision about saying, okay, I screwed this up, let me move on. Okay, so now I've mixed it up and it's a nice ratio. You can see that it is a good kind of consistency of like melted ice cream, right? It's ice cream soup right here. Okay? That's perfect. If it's like milk, it's too thin. Okay? If it's like sour cream at this stage, it's too thick. It won't, you know, it will eventually get to sour cream and to butter and all those things, but it's not. It shouldn't be there now. It'll be too hard, and you'll lose detail because you're going to put it on there, and it'll be too thick to put it on, and you'll lose detail. So what I'm going to do is going to rinse my hand off now in the bucket, right? Just to keep myself clean. And now I'm going to get I want a nice clean brush. This brush has a little Murphy's oil soap on it. I want to get rid of that before I put it in my glass. Okay? Dry it off. And now, what am I going to do? Am I going to just dump it on there? That's a clue segment. That's silly. Somebody touched this. You can dump a little bit in, but what I really want to do is I want to take my brush, I want to dip it into my plaster, and I want to pat it. Okay? Now, the reason I'm doing it that way is because that patting is a really good way of getting the detail without kind of smearing it on there. When you work with water clay, it's very important that you pat it and rather than brush it. This is not so critical, but it's still a good habit to get into. So I'm going to dip, pat, dip, pat. Now you guys are going to have a lot of undercuts, and you're going to have to be careful about making sure you get deep down underneath there. Okay? Now if you want to move a little bit quicker, you could pour a little in the side here. And dip it, pat, dip, pat, dip, pat. But what I don't want, what I really don't want is this to be solid. Okay? Repeat after me. This is not going to be solid. We want as weak of a mold as possible that will come off our cast. Okay? Because the weaker this mold is, the easier it will be to be broken later. Okay? Remember, ultimately we're going to break this. So we don't want to turn this into, you know, the Hoover Dam. So I'm dip patting, I'm getting my detail. Another great way of getting rid of air bubbles is to kind of move it around with a little bit of air pressure. And that pushes it into all the cracks, and it also pops some of the air bubbles. You've got to be careful, you get a little lightheaded standing back up quick. And you're old. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm getting what's called a detail coat. So this is the coat that's going to remain. This is the holder of our information, right? Now the most important part was around the thing, but now that we have the information from the bottom, now what we have to do is establish the height. If I miss the spot, let me know. The total thickness of the mold can be as thin as like a hair. I've seen molds where you hold them up and you can see through them because the plaster is that thin. That's not what you're going for because that's kind of that's too delicate. That's taking a terrible risk. What you want is, 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch at the thinnest spots. A good consistency of 1/4 of an inch is perfect. Okay? So if you could possibly make this perfect, it would be 1/4 inch all the way around. Now, it's really hard to do that and to kind of control that. So what I do is kind of pat